And we're trying to give people the time, the space, and the support required for them to do things in a different way.
Welcome back to the Truly Modern School podcast. You might remember a couple of weeks ago we heard from Oscar and Enya. Oscar and Enya are music students. I myself am not a musician, but one of the things I know is that great songs often have what's called a bridge, a connector between two pieces, and that's what we have for everybody today. We've got a bridge episode between our past series on the value of creativity and our upcoming series on innovative approaches in science. Tim, who are we going to hear from today?
Today we're going to be speaking with Rick Pardo, and Rick is the Learning Coordinator for Culture for Innovation at the Thames Valley District School Board. Most recently, Rick and his School Within a School team have been nominated for a Community Innovation Award through the Pillar Nonprofit Network. Rick is a dynamic educator who's got a passion for creativity, innovation, and for science. And so we're going to hear from him where he's talking about a variety of different topics dealing with education today.
Sounds good. Let's listen.
Today, we welcome Rick Pardo to the podcast. Rick is the Coordinator for Culture and Innovation at Thames Valley District School Board. Previously, he held titles as a faculty instructor, a high school science teacher, and project coordinator at St. Joseph's Hospital Group. Rick is a dynamic educator who has a passion for creativity. Welcome to the Truly Modern School podcast.
Thank you, Tim.
So we just finished up having some PD days in our schools. What's Thames Valley doing in terms of helping us lead the way for creativity and innovation?
Well, Tim, my position for one, we're now in the fourth year of having a position that is coordinating the culture of innovation for the Thames Valley District School Board. In setting this up, it wasn't about having a department that was in charge of all innovation or to have an idea center. It was to create the conditions for others to be creative and innovative. So I think one of the ways that we've led the way is we've given people permission, and we're trying to give people the time, the space, and the support required for them to do things in a different way.
You're talking about giving teachers the ability to accomplish great things. So if teachers have great ideas, how are we going to let those ideas come to fruition?
Well, exactly. So we invite people to think differently. So we do things, for example, as having a look at existing school system. And what we did was we provided an opportunity. We said, what if you could teach with no subjects and no periods? What if the kids just showed up at 8:30 in the morning and went home on the bus at 3, and in between you could do what you needed to do with them? So we offered that as an opportunity for teachers to think about. Rather than staying in our silos of subjects and having the kids pick up and move every 75 minutes, what if we did away with that disruption? What would you do then? And we also put some certain conditions around it, the conditions where you had to stay with the curriculum. You had to teach the Ontario curriculum. You could not violate any of the collective agreements. You had to work with somebody else from a different discipline. Oh, and the other thing was, too, there was no new money. No new money, no extra staffing. So he had to do it within the existing system. So we invited people to think differently, but you often hear about trying to think outside the box. This is about thinking inside the box. We definitely are in a box when we talk about education system, public education. There are certain rules and regulations we have to follow. But often when it comes to creativity, it's being inside that box and figuring out how much wiggle room you have where the true innovation and creativity comes. Teachers have responded to it. We started with about 6 groups that thought they would take it on for the first year, and now we're up to over 45.
Wow.
Right.
And so what are some of the common credits or courses that are being combined that you're seeing in these schools?
Yeah, in the first few years of it, we've seen people tended to go with it in grades 9 and grade 10. So secondary schools, grade 9 and grade 10. The teachers, we had teachers in the senior grades 11 and 12, come up with course bundles that they pitched to the students, but they couldn't get enough students involved to run the program. We put that down to the fact there's a lot of anxiety over something new when marks and things for scholarships and final grades are more important. So the grade 9 and the grade 10 kids coming into grade 9 and grade 10 were a little more amenable to try something a little bit different. But right now we've got programs running for everything from grade 2 to grade 12. It helps if the programs that are being offered are bundles of core compulsory courses. So a math, science, English, and geography, for example, are put together in grade 9. Right. Or they'll put English and history together in a 2-course bundle. So this is about de-streaming. It's about taking down the walls of subjects and courses. And we're building this as we go. So there's the main thing for people to get started with this is they got to find somebody they can work with. They don't necessarily have to be friends, but they have to be colleagues and be able to work professionally with one another. Because in this project, there's a lot of, we've got one group, several groups right now that they'll put 65 to 70 students together with 4 teachers all day, every day. It's not a genius hour or a genius project. This is all day, every day, as the students work through a series of projects that are brought to them usually from community partners that we've established, so that the kids are working on authentic problems and the curriculum is bubbling up and coming through the work that they're doing in the project.
What have been some of the student reactions to that amount of time or that amount of hours?
We get the full range. Okay. It's the students that get drawn to this. You'd think there are 2 types of, generally there's 2 kind of students that are drawn to this. There's the super achievers who want to take education to the next level. But then you also have the students and the parents that look at this. The regular school hasn't been working for them, so they got to try something. So we tend to in these classes they seem to have the polar extremes in them. Right? So we get kids that love it. This has turned their life around. We get kids that can't figure out how this works and they want just a regular classroom. I should say too, though, what's interesting is that when the grade 9 students do it, they're coming out of an elementary program. They don't know what high school looks like. Mm-hmm. So when they jump into something like this course bundling, they'll often not know. They just want regular school because their friends are doing regular school. Their friends are doing the regular thing. But when after they go through this school within a school model, then they'll do a semester of regular school. They'll come back in grade 10 and they'll ask for the school within a school, right? Because they didn't know what it was. They didn't know what regular school was like. Yeah. We're in year 3. We're still in early days with this. It's people are getting their heads around what it looks like. Parents, students. It's been, again, the growth of it by and large shows us what the potential is for this.
Well, and to think that almost every school is offering some sort of credit package, or even in the elementary grades, like you're alluding to. So, where do you see education in the next 5 to 10 years, or where would you want it to be? And I mean, that's one of those catch-22 questions, because we always ask teachers if they had that ideal classroom, what would it look like? But where do you see education moving? Are we moving towards these school within a school kind of models of just changing how we think about education?
We are alive at a very interesting time in human history, right? When you look at the advent of the internet, and even more so the smartphone. Smartphone has basically let us connect. We are at the very beginnings of a hive mind right now. We're sharing information ubiquitously, especially in the developed countries right now, and even the developing countries. I mean, you've got sheep herders in Afghanistan that are illiterate that are running smartphones. So people are connecting, and we have to, as an education system, have to figure out what education looks like. Why would we put youngsters with adults for significant chunks of the day? Why would we collect them all together? What's the point of doing this in the first place? The current education model that we're working with was developed around the turn of the last century, around the 1900s. It was at a time when there was massive change in society. We're moving towards a manufacturing assembly line model. And it made perfect sense to have one teacher in front of about 28 kids, and you could replicate that factory, put a bunch of kids about the same age in a room together, and then move them along like you would an assembly line. It makes sense. We have a totally different societal model now that the education system has to adapt to, and it will adapt, or the current one will wither and die. what we've put out and offered to, I think, but the people that are going to figure this out are the ones that are in it. This is not going to be something that comes from above. And that's what we've tried to do with this particular approach, is to offer this as an opportunity, not an obligation. This isn't a binder that's going to come, or a series of booklets that are going to come from the Ministry of Education somewhere. You can't transplant what they're doing in Finland here. It's the people that are working in classrooms with students are going to figure this out if we give them the opportunity, and we have to give them the opportunity.
So with your background of being a science teacher, and this is sort of the flavor that we're talking about here, what kinds of great innovative approaches are you seeing in the world of science? What kind of tech or different things that are teachers doing in the world of science these days?
It's about using the tech. I think what's happening is that the shiny newness of tech is starting to wear away a little bit. I think we're starting to consider the smartphone and the tablet and the Chromebook and all that sort of thing. We're starting to think of them now as tools, no more than you would a ruler or a pencil, right? You have to keep your tools sharp. You have to know how to use them. And I think that's what I'm seeing, is it's the integration of it. Students are taking them for granted. Teachers are taking them for granted now. And we're learning how to leverage these things into learning and developing and creating. And I think it gives what I'm seeing is that just like you're doing with this podcast, right? We are creating. We're no longer a society of passive consumers that wait for the next thing to come off the assembly line. This is about inviting people. The promise of technology is to invite people in to be active participants in creating the world that they want to be part of. And I guess that's what I'm seeing in terms of the event. Yeah, we can do more bells and whistles, and we can point to the innovations that have happened in cancer treatment, in driverless cars, you can and all of that stuff, all of that is a couple of clicks away from anybody. Any child, any adult can. It's not a question of having a finite amount of time to learn things anymore. It's constant and ubiquitous, and that's the biggest transition I'm seeing. That's the hope.
Okay, that's
right?
the hope. So if after listening to this podcast, teachers have questions or are interested in any of the topics that we've mentioned, how can they get in touch with you, or how can they get the ball rolling with some of these different ideas?
Okay, well, they can get in touch with us. Email is r.pardo@tvdsb.ca. You can also go to the website, and at the bottom there's a link there for School Within a School. That will take you to give you some of the background and some links there, what we're trying to work on. It's a work in progress, but you're more than welcome to do that. We've had a number of different school boards around Canada and some from the U.S. that have come up to see what we're doing. So we have visitors come through all the time. I mean, you really have to see this, and what I would invite people to do is not to take this podcast's word for it, is to, if you were interested, come on over and we'll get you in a classroom. You can talk to some of the kids and some of the teachers that are doing it.
Awesome. Yeah, great things happening at Thames Valley School Board. Thanks for chatting and hanging out with us today.
Oh, thanks for coming in.
So that was my interview with Rick Pardo. Bill, what stood out to you in the interview?
There's lots of great ideas that come from that conversation with Rick. One of the things that I notice is that there's lots of good value in lots of the structures that we've had in place in school for a long time. Rick and his team, they understand those structures, they know those structures, and they're able to innovate inside of those things. They're able to build on all of the good things that we've done already instead of starting from zero.
I thought it stood out to me when he was talking about the size of some of these school-within-school programs, and that they are effective even with 25 students in a classroom, upwards to 60 to 70 students, that that community is sticking together.
The collaboration is really the heart of all of the good things that Rick and his team were able to do. There's huge collaboration between the students, obviously. Collaboration between teachers is the core, that trust and that transparency and that common goal. There's lots of constant feedback from the students in terms of informing the practice of the teachers moving forward. Everything's not predetermined. Like a lot of creative things, it's messy, it's complicated, but it's informed by students, which is key.
He had also mentioned that many of the classroom assignments and projects were brought to the teachers on behalf of community partners. And I mean, on the podcast here, we've been talking to a lot of these community partners. So it's nice to see those groups being used effectively in the classroom.
It's definitely not the silo that we've met in the past. It's definitely not the single teacher, the lone adult in the room with all of the answers. It's definitely not like that anymore. And you're absolutely right. Those community partners are huge. They're ready and willing to be engaged. They're waiting for somebody to talk to them. They've got lots of opinions about school.
Yeah, and at the end there, he was talking about if you are unfamiliar with what school within a school is, you should get in to see it, because we've been lucky enough to be able to communicate and see what's going on in some of these classrooms. But it is pretty phenomenal to see what these students are experiencing on a daily basis.
Rick and his team are ready and willing to help on a local, a regional, a national, and an international level. So get in touch with them. Great things are happening.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.